Hello, and welcome back to Thinking Deliberately. Today is episode 4, and we're going to talk about awareness is a skill, introducing the awareness quotient. In episode 1, we began with the uncomfortable idea that the way you think may be the problem. In episode 2, we looked at the self as something constructed, not something fixed. In episode 3, we explored dynamic intelligence, the capacity to become aware of how you are constructing yourself, your context, and your response in the moment. Today, we need to talk about awareness, because awareness is one of those words people use as if everyone knows what it means. And I'm afraid they do not. In fact, I think awareness has been softened, spiritualized, commercialized, and quietly ruined. People talk about awareness as if it means being calm. It doesn't. They talk about awareness as if it means being emotionally open. It does not. And they talk about awareness as if it means being mindful, compassionate, present, balanced, enlightened, or good at posting inspirational quotes over pictures of mountains on LinkedIn. It does not. Awareness is not a mood, it's not niceness, it's not the ability to sit cross-legged without checking your phone, and it's not the same as sensitivity, or even the same as insight. You can have insight and still behave like an idiot. You can understand yourself beautifully in theory and still repeat the same pattern under pressure. You can describe your childhood, name your attachment style, understand your triggers, and still construct the same old response when someone threatens your identity. That is because awareness is not proven by what you can explain afterwards. Awareness is proven by what becomes available to you while the construction is happening. That is the key. Awareness in constructive development theory is the degree to which you can notice your construction of self, context, and response in the moment. Not just afterwards, not just in reflection, and not just when life is calm and you have a notebook, a candle, and an hour to think about your feelings. I mean, in the moment, in that meeting or in that argument, even in the silence, under pressure, and in your decision making moment. In the split second before the old version of you takes over again. That is awareness. And if awareness can be more or less available, then awareness can be developed. That means awareness is not merely something that you either have or do not have. It is a skill. More than that, it is a developmental capacity. And this is where the awareness quotient comes in. The awareness quotient, or AQ, is a way of thinking about levels of awareness. It's not a personality type, it's not a label, and it's not another little box to crawl into and decorate, but as a measure of how much of your own construction you can become aware of, and therefore how much choice becomes available to you, because awareness and choice are linked. If you cannot notice your construction, you cannot meaningfully choose it. You can only repeat it. You may approve of it afterwards, you may explain it, you may even defend it. You may even build an identity around it, but without awareness, it is still mostly habit wearing the costume of choice. That is why AQ matters. It gives us a way to understand why two people can have the same information and respond at completely different levels of complexity. One person hears criticism and collapses into shame. Another hears criticism and becomes angry. Another hears criticism and wants to understand the other person's perspective, whilst the fourth hears criticism and begins to examine the construction of criticism itself. Same event, different awareness. Different world, different responses. This is not about who is a better person. It is about what is available to awareness. At lower levels of awareness, we tend to experience our thoughts, emotions, and interpretations as reality. I feel disrespected, therefore I have been disrespected. I feel attacked, therefore this is an attack. I feel certain, therefore I am right. I feel uncomfortable, therefore something is wrong. At higher levels of awareness, something changes. The person can begin to see the gap between the event and the construction of the event. They can say, I am constructing this as disrespect, or I am experiencing this as criticism. I notice I want to defend myself, or I can feel my identity trying to protect itself. I may be making this mean more than it actually means. That is a different order of awareness. And once that becomes possible, choice begins to appear. Not perfect choice, not total freedom, but some fantasy version of consciousness where you float above life like a smug balloon. but enough choice to interpret the automatic response, enough choice to ask a better question, and enough choice to not make things worse. And frankly, that would be a developmental breakthrough for half the human race. And we know which half. Because much of what passes for human behavior is simply people making things worse while feeling completely justified. That is low awareness. It's not badness or stupidity, it's just low awareness. The person is captured by their own construction and does not know it. And because they do not know it, they think the problem is out there. The other person is unreasonable. The organization is toxic. The partner is being difficult. The employee is resistant. The child is disrespectful, or the public is stupid. Maybe that politician is evil, or the system is broken. And sometimes, yes, there may be some truth in those things. But the AQ asks a more difficult question. What am I constructing, and from what level of awareness am I constructing it? That question should change the entire game because it returns us to participation. It doesn't say everything is your fault. That would be simplistic nonsense. It says that your response is partly constructed through your current level of awareness, and that means development is possible. The awareness quotient gives us a language for this development. At the lower AQ levels, people are more likely to be embedded in their constructions. They are inside the thought, inside the emotion, and inside the identity or their story. At the higher AQ levels, people can increasingly see the construction as construction. They can observe the pattern. They can hold multiple perspectives. They can notice the context they are creating. And they can question the self that wants to respond. They can become aware of the map they are using and eventually aware that even the map is constructed. That is development. They don't need to become calmer or nicer. They don't need to be more successful or the sort of person who says, I hear you, while quietly preparing a rebuttal. Development is increasing awareness of construction. And this is why many forms of personal development are so limited. They try to improve the person without questioning the level of awareness from which the person is being constructed. So people get better tools, but keep the same awareness. They learn better communication skills, but use them from the same ego. They learn leadership models, but still construct leadership as control. They might learn coaching questions, but still construct coaching as advice in disguise. And they learn emotional language, but still construct emotion as evidence of truth. They learn mindfulness, but still construct the self as something that needs to be protected, admired, or healed. Without development in awareness, new tools often become old patterns with upgraded packaging. That is why the AQ is so important. It asks, how aware is the person of the construction they are participating in? How much can they notice? How much can they hold and how much can they choose? How much complexity can they stay present to without collapsing into certainty, defensiveness, performance, blame, or identity protection? And that is not soft, that is not fluffy, and it's not self-help. That is hard developmental work. Because awareness is not always pleasant. Sometimes awareness is humiliating. You catch yourself being petty. You notice your generosity has a hidden transaction inside it. And you realize your honesty is aggression with better branding. And you see that your helpfulness is a need to be needed. You notice your spiritual language is covering avoidance. Or maybe you realize your certainty is fear trying to sound intelligent. This is why many people do not actually want awareness. They want reassurance. They want language that makes their current self feel more acceptable. They want a model that explains them without disturbing them. They want development without self-disruption. But awareness disrupts. It has to. Because the self you are currently constructing has organized itself around not seeing certain things. AQ is the measure of how much of that construction can come into view. And the more that comes into view, the more deliberate your life can become. It's not easier, it's not more simplistic, it's just more deliberate. And that distinction matters. Higher awareness does not mean you never suffer. It does not mean you never react. It does not mean you become permanently wise, calm, or above it all. It means more of your own construction becomes available to you. And when more becomes available, more becomes possible. You can pause. You can question, reframe, you can choose, and you can respond. You can construct deliberately rather than automatically. And that is the point. The aim is not to become a perfect human being. The aim is to become less unconscious in the construction of being human. So here is the question for this episode. How much of yourself can you actually see? Not the version you present, not the version you defend or the version you explain, not the version you have turned into a personal brand. How much of the construction can you see while it is happening? Can you notice the story forming? Can you notice the emotional pull? Can you notice the identity being protected? Can you notice the response before it becomes behavior? And can you notice that the you who is reacting may itself be a construction? That is awareness. And that is why the AQ matters, because your life is not only shaped by what you experience, it is shaped by the level of awareness from which you construct the experience. This is thinking deliberately. And today's uncomfortable thought is this. You may not need more confidence, more motivation, or more advice. You may need more awareness, because the part of you trying to improve your life may be the same part quietly constructing the problem. Thank you.